Okay, I think we can make a start. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. I'm Councillor James Husband, I'm Chairman of the committee, and I'm joined this evening to my right by my colleagues. Now, there are due to be 5 of us on the panel this evening. I know because a number of, actually unfortunately, a couple of people wishing to speak have been affected. I think the traffic in central London has been absolutely terrible. So in fact, 2 of my colleagues have yet to join us. However, the quorum for the committee is 3, so it's entirely proper that we can actually begin. To my left are the officers. They will be presenting the reports for the cases in front of us and offering us advice on matters relating to planning. And I think with that said, we can probably make a start by asking, are there any apologies for absence, Mr. Trout? No, we're expecting Councillor Idris and Councillor Ali to be able to join us. They haven't sent apologies. Okay. Now, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Something minor as a declaration. There are 3 cases tonight in which ESSA appear. As I declare that I am a trustee of ESSA, but I've not been involved in any of these cases. But I just thought I'd declare it.
Okay. I would like to mention, in similar fashion, quite a few of the cases are actually in my own ward. But in particular, when we reach the case of 84 Abingdon Villas. This is a property where I had actually objected to a licensing application for the premises. And on that basis, at a previous planning committee, when an application was considered, I thought it was best that I step aside. And I'm going to do the same thing this evening. I should emphasize I have no pecuniary interest in this matter at all, but I will step aside. And I would recommend, colleagues, that Councillor Mackover will take the chair for that case in particular. Okay? That's right. Yeah, that's right. So Councillor Idris has just joined us. I was going to say, Waller, we just at the point of declaring interest. Do you have any interest you need to declare?
Only one of the items on the South pack is in my ward, but I haven't had any discussions or any communication with anyone. Yeah, thank you.
That's understood. Thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, so we now turn to the minutes. First of all, there are minutes of the planning meeting that was on Planning Application Committee meeting on the 18th of April. I've got the minutes here. I think Councillor North, you were on that committee with me. Can I agree that I sign those minutes? Okay, thank you. And we also have minutes of the meeting that was held on the 23rd of May. And I think this time, actually Councillor Mackover and also Councillor Idris were also on that meeting. So can we agree that I can sign those minutes? Thank you. Good. Okay. It might be helpful if I indicate the order in which we're going to consider the cases. In just a moment or two, we're going to start with the land to the rear of 58 Penaware Road. We will then move on to the advertising application in Hans Place, Warwick Gardens, Firlbeach Gardens, Abingdon Villas, and then moving on to Redcliffe Place, the carport, which is adjacent to 31 Lexham Mews, then 40 Victoria Road, and finally the application at Westbourne Grove. Okay, so that's going to be our order. So if we can if we can start by turning to the South Pack, and I think Alice Culver, Alice, you're going to introduce this, aren't you? So please, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the addendum report, which sets out some changes to the officer's report. The application relates to the land to the rear of 58 Pennywhen Road, which I've identified by the red arrow on the slide in front of you. Members may note from the officer's report and set out in section 4, there is quite a complex site history, and most recently there was an appeal which was dismissed, which has been set out in the table in section 4.6 of your report. The application itself seeks planning permission for the construction of a single dwelling house. This would be 1 bedroom and 1 person. On the slide, you can see the proposed site plan where the property would be located. Just to take members through some of the images of the existing site, this view shows the frontage of the site. Members can note the hoarding along the frontage and the location of a London plane tree located within the garden of number 58. On this next slide, this is taken along Pennywhen Road, and again, members can note the location of the existing tree, and I'll just try and point out where the application site is itself with my cursor, which is just here. This view is taken from Warwick Road to the west. Members again can note the location of the existing tree and the site where the proposed dwelling would be located. Just to go through the proposed floor plans, the proposed unit would be single storey, would include a terrace located to the frontage, and as previously mentioned, would be 1 bedroom, 1 person with an open living area. The proposed front elevation can be seen on this slide. A condition is recommended to secure further details of materials and finishes. Members may know on this plan the scheme has been designed with a green roof, which can be seen if I indicate it with my cursor just here. A proposed section can be seen on this slide. It should be noted that the excavation associated with the new property has been reduced since the last application, and members may note that we are now raising no objection in terms of the impact to the nearby tree. This image I've taken from the internal daylight and sunlight report that was produced, and this just shows the proposed massing in the context of the surrounding buildings. That concludes my presentation. My officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the legal agreement and the recommended conditions in section 9 of my officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we have speakers for this first case. So, Councillor Wade, I think you've registered, Linda, you've registered to speak. So please, you have up to 3 minutes. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Earls Court Society and Pennywhen Road neighbours. There are 3 main issues here that are of concern: the impact on the conservation area, the depth of drains, and light for future residents. Pennywhen Road is within the Earls Court Square Conservation Area. The twin terraces were built between 1870 and 1880 out of London stock brick with stucco decoration and canted bay windows. There is a campaign to promote conformity in the paint colour when properties undergo cyclical maintenance, the next being sanctuary housing properties opposite. This property would be unique and therefore out of character and undermine the integrity of the architecture of the street. It is noted that the applicant has restricted the depth of the foundations in line with the planning inspector's recommendation to protect the adjacent tree. The tree trunk touches the boundary wall, but concerns are raised about the impact of the tree roots during the installation and connection to the drain. There is concern that the trenches would have to go deeper than the 250 millimetres. Following the formula in relation to soil pipe fall, it is recommended there should be a fall of, I think it's 12.5 millimetre fall per 1 metre, and so there is concern that it would go deeper than the 400 millimetre of excavation that was discounted by the planning inspector. Therefore, and this has been raised, what is happening about the impact on the roots of the tree during the excavation of the drains. This dwelling will be entirely under the canopy of a large tree, and therefore, despite the comments made by the inspector, there remains the issue of light in habitable rooms. Looking at the tree this morning in full leaf, I cannot estimate how much daylight the future occupant would have via the skylights, but any light would be substantially reduced for the majority of the year, and that includes the courtyard area. Citing Sophie Hicks' construction in Earls Court Square was considered to be provocative by residents who feel that that application was inappropriate and has never contributed to and has actually detracted from the streetscape. Unfortunately, the meeting between the applicant and neighbours could not take place due to timing and availability. In conclusion, I do not feel this application meets the test of the decisive issues as set out in the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, I think the applicant is here, Mr. Tofts. Is that right?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I'm not the architect. I'm the applicant, and
No,
the
I said
architects aren't
the
here, I'm
applicant,
afraid.
yes.
Sorry.
So please, in similar fashion, you've up to 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think I would just start by saying I wasn't aware there was any objections from the Earls Court Society, just from Councillor Wade. I was aware there's 2 objections against the application, both of which deal with points which have been dealt with by the inspectorate, and then secondly, the issue of the arboricultural routes has been dealt with through consultation with the arboricultural tree officer at the council. So I think all of the bases have been covered. We've tried to do our very best and worked with the council throughout on the application. In terms of the only point I think that is a new one to me is in relation to the drains. So the drains are going to run through the slab, and they will run from the north-west, which is where the bathroom is, potentially with a macerator if needed, to the northeast, which is nearest to the existing terrace, and then directly south. So they'll be as far away from the main part of the routing system as possible. But as noted in the officer's report and the numerous appendices, the routes have been surveyed, and they are predominantly much lower than 250 millimetres. So there shouldn't be any harm to the tree. And I think that the arboriculture officer has been very stringent in his view on this and wouldn't be putting his professional opinion on the line for this type of application. Notwithstanding this, if there was any issues with the way that we were dealing to deal with the drains, that can be dealt with via condition, and the condition can simply just not be discharged if the council are not happy with that. In relation to the other matters with regards to conservation, this is a matter that was dealt with in a lot of depth within the appeal. You may see in the officer's report and also within the appeal decision that the inspector was minded to say there was a very limited impact on the conservation area, and he didn't go as far as to say that it would have made an enhancement on the area, but I think it would be potentially helpful to note that even the image of the hoardings which were shown there isn't really the state they're in at the moment. I've only bought the site within the last 2 years. It's been in a terrible state over the last 10 years, I believe. It's been fly tipped, it's been set alight, it's been vandalised, it's been broken into. It's a site which I would say is a massive detractor to the conservation area currently, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, our opportunity to ask questions. Who'd like to go first? Lloyd.
Thank you. To Councillor Wade, first of all, to clarify the point that the applicant made, is there an objection? I can't see it in the pack from the Earls Court Society, and if so, are you representing the Earls Court Society this evening?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. I'm familiar with the site. I walk past it quite regularly. I can see both sides of this coin. To the applicant, I note that you say that there's no damage to the tree roots. Will the construction of this also draw back from the water that the tree will get? Because many of our trees in the area suffered in the last 2 dry years, and we're already touching on a hosepipe ban at the moment. So, in your opinion, and I'll ask the same to Councillor Wade afterwards, is there any damage to the tree suffering lack of water because you're going to concrete over half of its tree roots?
I'd be minded to say no. I must caveat that I'm obviously not an arboricultural expert, but I did hire 2 arboricultural experts to deal with the application, and the council's tree officer also dealt with it at appeal. I think the case officer who was present at the appeal will be able to vouch for it was a matter that was dealt with in very much depth. The water that will be within the roof area will be re-diverted onto the site, so there won't be any loss of water as such. I think, if I may touch on the point of shading as well, I don't know about anyone else here, but I walked through Hyde Park to get here today, and actually the way that deciduous trees work is actually quite good for the environment in terms of having shading. So when it's winter, you get a lot more light, but when it's summer, you get that natural cooling, and it impacts the urban heat island effect that you would get in a property otherwise if it wasn't having dapple shading. I don't think, I mean, I'll leave it to if the officer has anything else to say on the arboricultural matters, but I think that the council's tree officer, who's very well versed in these things, was very much happy with the situation with it. I feel like I'm not a tree expert, but I think I've picked up quite a lot through this experience, and the amount of area that will be taken, the volume that will be taken, which isn't actually even being used by the tree for roots, is so small compared to the RPA, which is the root protection area, which is a British standard, which it works well if you're looking at a tree in a field. When you're looking at an urban environment, and trees roots obviously work in a 3D manner, the trees will go where water is, so it's not necessary that there would be lots of the vital roots that would have been in that area, and there have been surveys which are in the appendices to the reports which were submitted that show that there weren't any major roots within the area that we're looking to build. In fact, the piling holes were surveyed with an air spade where they move all the air out of the way, and the photos were within the appendix to the application. So I don't think there'll be an issue there. I think it's also, sorry to say it again, but important to note that the site has had a lot of fly tipping on it, and there's also quite a lot of hard standing on it as well, which would probably impact any level of water running into the ground at that point anyway. But thank you for your time.
And just one final question. You're planning to live in this property yourself?
Absolutely, yes, I would like to.
Thank you. And Councillor Wade, do you have anything to say about the tree and the water?
I think that this is actually, I think, the rear garden to 58 Warwick Road, and not actually the land adjacent at the rear of 58 Pennywern Road. Minor detail on the address. The back garden of 58 Warwick Road is divided into 3 parts. So when you see the black hoarding, actually the hoarding is in fact divided into 2. So you get the tree which is in the centre part, and then you get the site which we're discussing now. I think that the tree is considered locally to be of such enormous amenity, and that is the reason why it's not personal, it's just everybody's passionate about this tree. They're very concerned because, as you know, trees have been under enormous stress. And just because a garden has not necessarily been maintained does not mean to say that it hasn't, because it's quite healthy at the moment. So there is concern that if you build over an area, that actually that you are reducing, especially as we're getting hotter weather and other trees are failing in the area.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. So, colleagues, our opportunity to question officers about this. Who would like to go first with questions? Well,
Thank you, Chair. My question is, the person who examined and actually regarding the tree, do we know if there is any damage, any damage going to happen to the roots during the build and after the build, and if you were to put a percentage on probabilities of damage, what percentage would you put on it?
Thank you for your question. In terms of the impact of the tree roots during the construction, we have recommended conditions to safeguard the tree during the construction, and that's condition number 6, which requires details to be provided to the council for review prior to any works commencing. That condition has been agreed with the applicant. In terms of a percentage of any damage to that tree, unfortunately I wouldn't be able to give an exact percentage. All I would remind members is that this has been reviewed at depth with our tree officer. They have visited the site and reviewed all of the amended details provided, and we are satisfied, subject to these conditions, that the dwelling can be built without harm.
Sorry, my percentage point is to just gauge, are we 100% sure nothing will happen with these conditions? Or are we 95, 85, 60% sure? That's all.
Thank you. Again, I think it would be difficult to give a percentage in terms of our confidence, but we are confident that we can deal with the matter by way of these conditions. For any reason, if details were to be submitted to us and we weren't confident that was going to achieve the health of the tree or have no impact, then we would look to refuse that information and ask for revised information to be submitted.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sam.
Question to our officers. Just so I understand the planning inspector's decision and its impact on what we've got in front of us, they were content with everything apart from the previous plan for the way this interacted with the tree. Are we satisfied now that what the inspector was concerned about with the tree has been addressed in this application?
Thank you for your question. You're right, the inspector did, and we did raise previously, a number of reasons for refusal. One of those was the impact of the tree. There was also an impact to the conservation area, the living conditions, and the impact in terms of permit-free parking. All of those matters have now been addressed and overcome. The reason the appeal was dismissed was the impact on the tree and the amount of excavation. Due to the changes as part of this application, officers are now satisfied that that reason has been overcome entirely.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we need to make a decision on this. I think this case, the appeal decision is an important material consideration for us. The inspector has given quite a clear direction. The reasons why the original the appeal was dismissed have been addressed, and I think as such, I think it's a form of application which I think it's quite hard to see really how it could reasonably be refused in this amended form. Does anyone wish to express a contrary view, or should I? Perhaps we can just have a vote. No? Yes. Councillor North, yeah.
I accept Chair, what you're saying, all I will say from the applicant who plans to live there is that there'll be lots of eyes watching this tree and there'll be lots of opinions, and you will hopefully be a member of the Earls Court Society very soon yourself. And so I just wanted to point that out.
All right. Well, no, I think that's noted, and I think, I think a lot of people would have the same thought, actually. Okay, so the recommendation in front of us is to grant, obviously with the conditions attached, and also the legal agreement, which obviously, because this is a car-free development, this new property. So can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? Okay, so that's granted. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If we could now move on to the next application, which is the advertising consent in Hans Place. And I think, Alice, that's back to you, isn't it?
Correct. Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks advertisement consent, and before I start my presentation, again, I draw members' attention to the addendum report. I've just set out an additional condition listed as condition 7, which references the limited time period. The advertisement consent is sought for shroud and hoarding on number 51 to 52 Hans Place, which is currently undertaking some refurbishment works in accordance with a permission granted in 2021. The current state of the application site can be seen on the slide before you. Members may note the location of the hoarding or the tunnel at ground floor level and the scaffolding located at the upper levels. The proposed front and east elevation can be seen on the slide in front of you. The shroud will be designed to mimic the existing front elevation of the buildings, and the advertisement will be located on the hoarding at ground floor level. That advertisement can be seen in a little bit more detail on this slide here, and I'll just use my cursor just to draw members' attention to it, just there. That concludes my presentation this evening. The officer's recommendation is to grant advertisement consent subject to the conditions set out within the officer's report and the additional condition on the addendum report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, no one's registered to speak about this, so we move straight on to questions to officers. Does anyone have a question? I'd actually just like to raise, I know we're recommending a 5-year time limit. I think a limit of some sort is definitely the right thing to do. I just wonder, 5 years seems to me quite a long time. I mean, these are very large, grand buildings in a very grand place. But at the same, and I think it's been a building site for a couple of years. But 5 years seems a long time. Is there a reason why we've suggested 5 years and not, say, 3? I don't know. Yeah.
So the 5-year timeframe has been taken from the details provided by the applicant. They've suggested that that's the time required to complete the development. Condition 7 in the addendum report does require the advertisement to be displayed either after that 5 years or when the works have been substantially completed, whichever is earlier. So if the works were completed within an earlier time frame, it would be expected that that would be removed.
Right, okay, I understand. I mean, I think, to be fair, bearing in mind the buildings that we're talking about, the idea that somebody would deliberately not complete the work in order to have an advert up, frankly, I agree, is implausible. But, okay, well, thanks for that. Colleagues, any other questions at all?
Sorry, will it be advantageous to just reduce the number of years? And reduce it to 2 years as opposed to 5 years?
Should members consider it necessary, we could reduce the amount of years to 2 years, and if that wasn't a long enough period, the applicants would just be required to reapply.
Yes, yeah, yes. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. What do we feel about this? Do we think a shorter period is in order? Lloyd? 2 years? Okay. Well, I think the suggestion from my colleagues is that actually 2 years, and as has been said, they could reapply. Obviously, if building work was still happening after 2 years, they could simply reapply. So I think what I would suggest is that we should have a vote, but with that amendment, so the condition is it's 2 years rather than 5 years. Yes? Okay. Happy with that? Okay. So, colleagues, can I see those in favour of the recommendation to grant, but with the time limit being 2 years rather than 5? Okay. So that's agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If we can now turn to the North Pack and consider the application at 66 Warwick Gardens. And I think Fiona Ray, Fiona, you're going to present this, aren't you?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So firstly, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the addendum report that's been circulated. Planning permission at 66 Warwick Gardens is sought for, in short, rear extensions, an adjustment to the closet wing and a new mansard roof extension, but the development description is in full on the report. Turning to the slides, we have an aerial image in front of you, and you can see within that there are some other mansard roof extensions within that group. There is lots of history along this part of Warwick Gardens, and they're including a refusal in 2012 at number 62, but there have been other approvals since at number 70, number 72 in 2014 and 2017, and officers have concluded on balance that that's acceptable as a result. Just turning again to the slides, we have some more photographs for you showing the position of where the extensions would be, the closet wing that is to be changed. I'll just show you very quickly that this relationship is the one we discussed about living conditions in the report and the potential impact to the near neighbour, and it's that location that I just want you to pay attention to. Showing you the floor plans with the lower ground floor plan existing on the top, proposed on the bottom, and you can see that infill extension that's proposed along the boundary line with number 68. At upper ground floor level, again, an infill extension. This one is set 750 millimetres off the boundary with number 68. Have the first floor plans, second floor, and the roof plan showing that new mansard level. The front elevation, the main change you can see is that mansard. And from the rear, we can see the adjustment to the height of the closet wing, the mansard level, and these infill extensions, including at upper ground floor, slightly set off the boundary. It is a section detailed just for your information and to give you an indication of the height difference, and a section drawing showing that relationship. And that concludes my presentation, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we do have speakers for this case. So if I can first ask now Mrs. Campion Awad and I think Mrs. Pessoan, you're both with us, yes? Is that right? Yes. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I was looking in the wrong direction. So, obviously, you're immediate neighbours to the property, yes? When you're ready, between you, you've got up to 3 minutes to state your objection. So, please go ahead whenever you're ready.
I represent my parents, who are the owners of number 68 Warwick Gardens. They were never contacted by RBKC about this meeting and were only notified by chance by one of their experts that this meeting was taking place 9 days ago. There has not been reasonable time to therefore prepare for this meeting, so I'd like this matter noted. My parents are old age pensioners whose lives and home have already been badly affected by a similar build as the applicant's, which was allowed to be built at number 70, which is next door to our family home at number 68. My parents and family will be further adversely affected by the proposed development to number 66, which is the other house next door to our home. We are already severely impacted by the bulk of the overbuild at 70, which your planners granted permission for in breach of reasonable standards of conservation. The same architect is now proposing an almost identical rebuild to number 66 to grant planning for the exact same design, bulk and build on the other house next door at 66 will sandwich and hem my parents' home in at number 68 by not one but two out of proportion adjoining large structures. This will add further to the lack of privacy, and we have already endured because of the rebuild at number 70 that will be insufferable. My parents and we have lost light from the rebuild at number 70, and we will be completely hemmed in if this committee gives the go-ahead to carry out another bulky overbuild at number 66. The inaccuracies and inconsistencies within the T16 Design's daylight and sunlight report for the applicants at 66 was picked up on by one of our experts, and it should be noted, as should our experts' comments about our right to light, which has been presented to you. There is an existing loss of light, but with both houses on each side of them being an overbuild, there will be a cumulative loss of light, which will have a terrible impact. We must therefore ask the members of the Planning Committee to postpone their decision. We would be happy if you wish to arrange a site visit to see for yourselves the damage that has already been caused by the overbuild at number 70. That way you can see for yourselves that and envisage the perspective of yet another near-identical rebuild by the neighbours on the other side of our house. Finally, I must state that I am amongst many others who do not wish to see this application succeed. As you are well aware, there is no third-party right of appeal in the English planning system, so once the decision is taken by you, it cannot be challenged by a third party unless there are grounds for a judicial review. But given there are several serious issues at stake, including safety, which our neighbour at 64 will allude to, most likely as not a judicial review will be the course that we will collectively be forced to take if this application succeeds. Thank you for listening to my objections.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Constance Campion-Howard, and my husband and I are the co-owners of 64 Warwick Gardens. There are three issues which we have grave concerns about, and therefore I must urgently bring these matters to your attention. We were only made aware of this meeting 9 days ago, however, which was not adequate time to prepare, but we urgently bring to your attention the fact that the rear wall of number 64, which is our house, has movement and subsidence issues which have to be considered, are partly as a result of a large tree root intrusion from the applicant's house at number 66. There is therefore a danger of ground heave if the proposed extension affects the roots further, because it will further destabilise the rear wall of 64. We have to urge extreme caution, therefore, and further and better particulars are called for, as no doubt there is a high degree of risk. The second area of risk to safety is the fact that the proposed additional storey and the alterations proposed to the staircase of 66 Warwick Gardens will adversely affect the loading on the party wall, the lateral stability of the wall, and the easement of support that it enjoys. The effects of this precise issue from number 70 on 68 should be ascertained, but we have been forewarned by our expert that the result of the proposed works at 66 would be to cause the party wall to subside and buckle, stressing the rear wall of 64 even further to the point where it becomes unstable. Since 70 was built, ownership has passed from developer to developer, and it's on the market currently.
So I'm just saying, I'm afraid time is more or less up. I think you had a third point. If perhaps you can just make that
the conservation of the Victorian houses and historic gardens in Warwick Gardens has been disregarded by the planners, if 70 is anything to go by. So if 66 is allowed, this will be a further intrusion on conservation, which the residents of Warwick Gardens and Kensington and Chelsea are more and more aware of. I therefore must urge that the committee refuse this proposal. I thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, I think an agent for the applicant is present. So if you can turn your microphones off, actually. Can you? That's great. So in similar fashion, you've actually got about 4 minutes if you need it, but
okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, officers, and thank you, members. My name is Parya Mundra, and I represent Keystone Planning. We are the planning agents for the applicants that live at this property. Our clients have constructively worked with the officers across a 2-year period, comprising one withdrawn application and the current application before the committee. The officers had previously raised the following 3 matters in the withdrawn application, which was lack of evidence of neighbor consultation, lack of a BRE-compliant daylight sunlight study, and sense of enclosure to the neighbors at number 64 due to a second-story infill element. The applicants then withdrew that application to fully address the matters raised with a fresh design approach and fresh evidence. Your officers have demonstrated today that the current proposals are acceptable in relation to design, sustainability, impact on neighbor amenity and heritage, and have recommended it for approval. The application is before the committee only because of neighbor objections. Officers consulted the 2 adjacent households on the either side of the site, and both these parties objected on design and amenity grounds. 2 others objected as well. However, the applicants had undertaken a local engagement exercise prior to submitting the current application, where 3 letters were received in support of the application. These are identified in the statement of community engagement submitted with the application, but not reported in the initial officer report. This includes an endorsement from the Edward Square, Scarsdale and Abingdon ESSA Conservation Area Association, as well as 2 letters of support from nearby residents at number 56 and 62. The Kensington Society was also consulted and followed up with, but no response was received. We interpret this as it having no objection to the scheme. We consider this support is of considerable weight in the determination of this application. The daylight sunlight report supporting the current application confirms that all effects are comfortably within the BRE guidance limits, and we note that the objecting party's review of the report is dismissed by the applicant's consultant as being based on flawed assumptions. Where the objector's review shows a very marginal breach of the BRE guidance, the applicant's report shows a pass. We consider that applicants' results are more reliable and should be given superior weight in the decision-making process. Therefore, the planning reasons for refusal raised by neighbors should be discounted completely or given low weight accordingly. In summary, this proposal for a minor but meaningful addition to an existing family home is in accordance with the local plan, and there are no material conditions that warrant a refusal for this application. I respectfully encourage members of the committee to approve the application, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, any questions? Lloyd, you go first.
Thank you. I'll ask a similar question to both parties, if I may, and that's about consultation and communication. There seems to be some disagreement. Can I just ask both of the applicants, you said that this was taken somewhat by surprise. Have you had any consultation from the applicant or their agent about this?
We were never approached by our neighbours. We were never approached by their consultant. We have had no communication with them whatsoever.
No letters and nothing verbal, no?
Nothing.
Okay, can I ask the same question?
From the applicants? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Can I ask the same question to the applicant? Have you consulted with your neighbours prior to this application?
Yes, and we have involved all of that details in the statement of community engagement that's with the report, and the officers have been notified as well. So we've held an online event. We've got appendices in the report for that. And both the neighbours were consulted.
No.
Do your appendices show me being present?
Sorry?
Do your
I'm
appendices show
sorry,
me being present?
You aren't able to.
It's an online consultation.
Sorry,
That's
I'm
at
going to
variance
stop you.
with the truth.
No,
Objection.
please.
That's
You're
at
not able
variance
to
with the truth.
kind of cross-question one another.
Yeah.
Actually, consultation requirements are set down in statute by central government. Obviously, we always encourage applicants to consult with neighbours, but there is actually no requirement in the planning system to do so. It's very important to understand that. Are there any other questions? Right, do you have anything else?
No, I was just going to further,
Okay, yeah,
just further to ask the applicant. You're claiming that you have consulted with. I get what the chairman's comments say, and that's quite correct. But you're saying you have consulted, and you have letters of support which are not in the pack, including one from ESSA. You have a letter of support from ESSA for this case.
That's right. We've got emails from them. So we'd consulted both the societies, and we've got that email, and we had sent that as an item to the officers. We've got emails on that, yes.
Okay, I'll be asking the officers that question after. Thank you very much.
Could I say something?
No, I'm sorry,
No.
you can't. I wanted to ask the applicant
Conflict of
an
interest.
important question,
She was on the committee.
which is that
Bless her.
a previous application was withdrawn, which is often a sort of code for saying that the officers weren't prepared to support it, and therefore it got withdrawn. And I think as a result of that, am I right in thinking that the infill extension has now been slightly offset, so it doesn't cover the full width of the building? Is that correct? Have I understood the plans
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
Is that what's happened?
That's right. So we were advised by the officers to set it back, and that's what we did on the upper ground floor, yes.
Any other questions, colleagues? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. Is well, let me get my thoughts together. The objector has mentioned another building, I think number 70, which is has been enlarged quite a bit. Has that did we have any issue with that? Was that all done under planning rules with our permission, or was that done and maybe being agreed retrospectively or whatever?
Yeah, to answer your question, number 70 had a mansard roof extension approved in 2017, and that was, I believe, at committee. And in November 17, the extensions were approved. The extensions are different to those here, because there was more. So there was an additional story on the closet wing. So on this property, the closet wing is similar in height to the existing. It's just being kind of brought up, so there's a vertical rise rather than that pitched roof. Whereas at number 70, there's another story on top of it. Also at number 70, the infill extension at upper ground floor level went right up to the boundary, so it didn't have the set-in. Okay. So all approved in 2017, but slightly bigger. That would be my summary.
Okay. Also, have you advised the applicant, I'm assuming you did, to consult with the neighbors, and how did they consult? And did we put the traditional, put it outside application, letters saying this is happening?
Yes, thank you. So we always encourage early engagement throughout the planning process. I can see that the applicant submitted within their planning statement in section 7 their own statement of community involvement. Mm-hmm. And within this, I can't confirm that this happened as a matter of fact, but it's within the public domain now. That the following neighbours were invited by letter to comment, mm-hmm. and there's a list of them. They received 2 objections, and they also received 2 letters of support. Those letters of support were from other neighbours within Warwick Gardens.
Okay.
Now within this it also says they contacted the Kensington Society and ESSA. I don't have a copy, however, of ESSA's letter of support, so I can't confirm or deny that, but there is a clear engagement strategy using letters that was undertaken in September 2022 is the summary here. But separately to that, whilst we always encourage it, we do our own statutory consultation. Mm-hmm. We've consulted neighbours, we've done a site notice, and we've done a press notice in line with what we're required to do. And we've given considerable weight to the objections received. Just really quickly, I think it's probably important procedurally to touch on the objectors' comments with regard to notification of this committee. So we did send letters to the 5 objections received, to those who objected, on the 13th of June, notifying them of this meeting, which is standard practice for what we do. I think the difficulty came in receiving that letter was because they used people to represent them. So it was the representatives that received that email notification.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You answered all my questions, including the one I was about to ask.
Oh,
you.
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lloyd.
Just to add to that, you've answered most of my questions. Is there anything from the pack that we've got that's missing? You mentioned some letters in support. Is there anything from the pack that's missing, or is it that they hope to get the support but the letter didn't come through or something?
So I can, because it's in the public domain, I'm happy to read it out to you. Letters of support were received from number 62 and number, apologies, can't confirm the other address, but it's another one on Warwick Gardens. I'm furiously trying to find it. So we had 2, those were the 2 people. So it was other neighbours within the group, but not the direct neighbours.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to, just to make sure that it was sort of in the record, if you like, that if we were minded to grant this, the key condition, I guess, is condition 2, compliance with the approved drawings. The reason I mention this is because I know from other discussions that we've referenced building work which was granted and built at number 70, which obviously is quite nearby, and various suggestions that that was not actually built in accordance with the approved drawings. So condition 2, appliance with, so that's set out in the planning permission if we were indeed to grant it. And presumably it's a matter for planning enforcement if people think that, if anyone thought that what was being built was not in accordance with the plans. Yeah?
That's absolutely correct, Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Colleagues, any other questions about this? No? Okay. Well, in that case, I think we probably need to make a decision. I mean, this application, it's been amended from something which was originally perhaps too large. I think what is set out, I mean, these are large buildings in Warwick Gardens. They're large, fine, late Victorian buildings. And I think what's proposed, probably on balance, needs to be considered acceptable. Is there anyone who would suggest a contrary view? No? No? Okay, in that case, I think we should take a vote. So the recommendation is to grant with the conditions that are set out in the report, some of which we've just discussed. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? So that is agreed. That's granted. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If we can now move back to the South Pack and consider the application at 60 Phil Beach Gardens. And I think, Alice, that's back to you, isn't it?
Correct. Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the addendum report, which sets out some changes to the officer's report before you this evening. The application relates to number 60 Phil Beach Gardens, which is a mid-terrace property located on the northwestern side of Phil Beach Gardens itself. I've identified the application site with the red arrow on the slide before you. The application seeks planning permission for the installation of a wheelchair lift. This would be located within the front light well, and the existing layout can be seen on the slide. The proposed layout can be seen on this slide. The wheelchair lift would be located by the bay window just here, and an access and walkway to the platform lift would be located along the front boundary, and a new gate would be installed on this boundary railing. It is worth noting, as set out within the officer's report, a similar application was submitted to the local planning authority and considered by the Planning Application Committee last year. That sought planning permission for a wheelchair lift and was refused. This application has changed the location and the design of the wheelchair lift, as seen on the layout in front of you. Just to give an image of the existing front elevation, and this, if you can see my cursor, is the location where the new gate would be. And to see that in plan form, sorry, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but the existing on the left-hand side and the proposed on the right, and just indicated by the red circle is where the new gate would be located. I would just draw members' attention to the conditions recommended. We are recommending condition 4, which requires full scaled plans to be provided of the gate. That concludes my presentation this evening. Officer recommendation is to grant, subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No speakers for this case, so it's straight to our questions to officers. Who'd like to go first? Walla.
Thank you, Chair. I think I remember this from last time, but I'm trying to see what's the main difference. I couldn't find what's the difference between the one refused and this.
So I just draw your attention to the proposed layout plan that I've put on the slide. So the existing or the proposal in front of members this evening would take access from the front here, and the wheelchair lift would be located in this location below the bay window. On the previous application, which members considered, the access was taken from the walkway or from the porch, and it was to be stored on this area located here. So the siting of it is different in this application.
And do we feel it is safer for pedestrians also? I mean, when it comes up, because my understanding is it will come up. Is it safe for both actually the users and people on the pavement? With this application, as opposed to the one before, because I remember safety was an issue also.
Thank you for your question. Officers are satisfied that it would maintain public safety in terms of the highway users. We are also recommending condition 3 to ensure that when the wheelchair lift isn't in use, it will remain at the downward position, I think it's been referred to, which would mean that it would be located at the lower ground floor level. It is also worth noting that it is a personal permission, so it is personal to the existing occupiers of that flat. So once they were to vacate, the wheelchair lift would need to be removed and the land reverted back to its former state.
On a conservation area question, those railings look to me to be about 150 years old. Are we saying that they are going to be removed and replaced with a modern gate?
So part of the railings would be removed and would be replaced with a gate. The details of the gate at this time are relatively limited. They have suggested that it would be black metal railings to match the existing, but in order to ensure that is carried out, we have recommended that condition for prior to the commencement, those details to be provided.
Would we normally allow Victorian railings to be removed in a conservation area as sensitive as Phil Beach, right next to the church, which is Grade 1 listed? I know the area quite well. I walk past it every day, and it's a beautiful area. And I just thought if any other neighbour wanted to remove their railings, they'd be up in arms. I don't understand why we're recommending removing original Victorian railings and not being able to put them back after.
Yeah, we have considered that as part of the officer's report, and we have found there to be less than substantial harm to the setting and the character and appearance of the conservation area. Because the railings would be replaced by a gate which would be sympathetic, officers have found that it would be acceptable and that there are appropriate or enough public benefits to outweigh that limited harm.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a practical point, as this is a personal permission and that it's to be reinstated as original when the lift is no longer required, would it be acceptable? It feels like a reasonable suggestion based on what Councillor North was saying, is that the original part of the railing, when cut away, should be stored. It's not a big thing to store, but should be stored somewhere in the lower ground, and then be able to be made whole again when the gate is no longer required, and therefore the effect would be there would be no long-term harm as soon as the permission is no longer, the personal permission is no longer required.
So at the moment, the condition, as condition 6, has been worded that the stair lift associated fitting shall be removed within 3 calendar months. However, there is the part that's with the exception of the new gate railings and stairwell in the light well. So that's suggesting that those changes would remain, and that is due to officers having considered that and finding that it would have an acceptable impact on the conservation area. If members wanted to introduce a new condition to maintain that existing railings, I'd just have to refer to see if that is something that we'd be able to practically put on.
Just to help, it wasn't to maintain the existing railing, it was the railing that has to be cut to enable access, which we understand. I understand why they're asking, but so that things could be restored and therefore there would be no sort of permanent harm to the conservation area and in the sensitive setting that Councillor North points out, whether that original item could be held safely so that it could be reinstated when required. So not, they would, in my view, they could still make the change, but we'd know that there would be no permanent harm because that piece of railing could be reinstated.
Yes, I mean, normally with personal permissions, you wouldn't say, they're normally associated with a use rather than operational development like this. But I suppose, it would be possible, I guess, if a section of railings is removed in such a way that they could be reinstated in time. I mean, stored. I don't know who would store them. I mean, that's an issue you'd have to consider. So if a section of railings was removed with the view that they'd have to be put back once the current people have moved on, I mean, who's going to store them? Who's going to put them back? It's just things that we need to consider. What about the other things that in the condition, with the exception of the new gate? Well, obviously the railings would replace, the original railings would replace the gate, I guess. And the stairwell, would remain. Just trying to think this through. So,
if you're asking for a view of who would store it and who would replace it, well, the part of the application would be to store. As I say, it's a piece of metal that's probably less than 10 centimetres deep, and there should be a space in a basement somewhere. It's an external item now, so it can still continue to be held externally in the lower ground area somewhere, I would hope. But that, I would think, if we just asked for it to be maintained so that it could be replaced at the end of the personal permission, then that would deal with the visible, the concern about less than substantial visible harm. There wouldn't be any harm at all once the personal permission is removed.
I think the condition is draftable in the fashion that you've described, in that the piece that's cut is stored until such time as the reinstatement is required, and then it's put back. If not that exact piece, then to the satisfaction of the local planning authority would be the wording that I would suggest. It's not uncommon for pieces of this type of furniture to be recast in a similar fashion to match the existing patination, for example. So if this committee were minded to grant consent, I would ask that it delegates authority to me as director to fashion a condition that meets your suggestion in terms of retaining the piece that's removed in safe storage and reinstated, or that a piece very similar to the satisfaction of the local authority is replaced to enable it to have a permanent finish.
Thank you very much. Okay, I mean, I think that sounds, just quickly.
Just a quick question. I'm assuming we're looking at this way of putting the lift because there is no way of doing it from the inside. Yeah, so this property doesn't have access from the inside. Okay, all right, thank you.
I mean, I think the discussion that we've just had, I think it's a slightly unusual condition, but I think it's one, first of all, officers should be involved in the actual exact detail of drafting it. But I think it does satisfy the test for conditions, which is to make something acceptable. And I think I would suggest on that basis, with this extra condition we've discussed, then I think on balance this probably is acceptable. I remember, like Councillor Idris, I sat on the committee where the previous application was refused because I think the impact on the conservation area was too much, it was too great. Is there anyone who'd like to express a contrary view? Lloyd?
I have a very big concern over this because in 50 years' time, they could look back at this planning application committee and say, you've just destroyed the frontage of a Victorian building that we are trying our utmost to preserve. It's not just the railings, it's the stonework at the base of the railings which they go in. If I could be given a guarantee that it would be replaced like for like so that anybody passing by could not recognise the difference, which is achievable with the stone and the brick and the railings, you can simply, they are matchable, they're not impossible, but it would be quite a costly exercise to do that. But the people in the future will look back at this decision and say, what on earth happened that you allowed a Victorian building to have a hole ripped in its front railings and it's next to a Grade 1 listed church. I know the area very well, and I can't agree to that unless I was given a cast iron guarantee from the officers that it would be replaced exactly as it was.
I agree with Lloyd, and I would just add, it's a conservation area, and it's an oxymoron to cut something in a conservation area and even store it for years and then come back and try to make it good. Because I know when people move house, they look at stuff and they just throw stuff away. And are we going to police their storage? It's going to be very difficult, in my opinion.
So.
And just to comment on me, from me, that's why I think, on reflection, Ms. Reid's suggested condition is elegant, because even though it asks for the original railing to be retained and reused, it also is reasonable in that, if it does get mislaid over time, there is still the requirement when the personal condition ends for identical railings to be fabricated so that people would not see the difference. Obviously, I would prefer the original to go back, but I think it is reasonable for the points that Councillor Idris makes, that if it gets lost over time, then we still have the power as the council to make sure that that looks identical. Cast iron guarantee, as Councillor Lloyd intelligently mentions, as it's cast iron, that would satisfy me. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we probably need to take a vote on this and see where we go.
Chair, just to clarify one thing before you vote. There was so someone mentioned stonework as well, but we're just talking about a section of railing, not any stonework as well. It's just the section of railing that would be stored and replaced like for like, you know, either the original or something like for like.
In simple forms, it's that frontage should be restored as it was before. If it involves brickwork and the stonework that the railings go into, sorry. So there will be a coping stone at the base, and they'll probably be set in lead in the coping stone, so it's like for like. Yeah. It does need to be a strict condition. I'm sorry, for me to support it, it needs to be a strict condition.
I think so officers are clear. We can actually do that if we, you know, given. I think the will is that if this is going to be acceptable, then a condition of that sort, which is very strict, I agree, needs to be adopted. Yeah.
I think a condition can be drafted to meet the satisfaction of this committee. What officers cannot provide is the 100% guarantee that it would be implemented. But we certainly could draft a condition that enables a like-for-like appearance going forwards.
Very good. Well, in that case, the recommendations to grant with the conditions attached, plus the new condition that we have just been discussing. So can I see those in favour of that recommendation, please? Can I see those against? So that... 2-4. Okay, perhaps slightly reluctantly, I'm in favour of the recommendation, so that is granted. So that's I've used a casting vote in favour of the application because it was 2 votes all initially. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, so I'm now going to pass the chair across to Councillor Mackover, who will chair the application, excuse me, at 84 Abingdon Villas. And I'll just go and sit at the side.
Thank you very much. Officers, would you like to take us through the slides?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So draw members' attention again to the addendum report and the tweaks within that, including an amendment to an informative. Planning permission here is actually sought for a change of use of part of the building, which is currently in lawful use as a sui generis use, previously used as a beauty salon, to revert back to Class E, which it was before, to join up with the larger parts of the site, and hopefully that will make sense more as we go through the slides. Importantly, it also involves the introduction of an condenser unit on the roof. So this is the application site, and it's this building here in the aerial view here. And just using my cursor, I don't know how well you can see, it's this small part of the building that is currently in sewer use that is proposed to join into that building as Class E. And it's on this flat roof here that an air conditioning unit is proposed. In terms of plans, there's no internal changes, it's just the change of use. And this is the proposed air conditioning unit that you would see on the roof. So that's the parapet and the shop front and how you would see it behind. This is its position set back on the roof. And this is some details of the timber enclosure with a lead sheet over for acoustic reasons. And here is a visual just showing you how the proposal will look with the AC unit in place and the change of use, which would be all internal. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we do have objectors and applicant registered to speak. So maybe could Mr. Ratner and Jutta Engler identify themselves, so I'm looking in the right direction?
Brian Ratner here. Hi. So
okay. So I'll start my little timer. You've
I don't know. I'm Mr. Ratner.
I'm right here.
Do
Thank
you want to go first?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Yes, so we have, under objectors, we've got Mr. Ratner and Jutta Engler.
Okay.
So
we'll share our time.
You'll share okay, so you've got a total of 3 minutes. Please start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. As owner and resident of the adjoining property that you just saw at number 82, I am objecting to the proposed change of use to accommodate a licensed cafe, as this will adversely affect my living conditions as well as those of the other neighboring properties due to increased foot traffic, parking, noise, odors, and vibrations, among other things. Prior reports relating to these premises, as well as prior decisions of this committee and that of the licensing committee, have reflected these concerns of disturbance to neighboring properties in this quiet residential street where I have lived with my family for nearly 10 years. Whilst the applicant has proposed some measures to mitigate sound transmission, such measures simply are not sufficient to compensate for the change of use from what was a nail salon with the capacity for a single therapist and 1 client to a licensed cafe restaurant serving customers from morning through to evening. On that note, should the committee decide to grant this application, it should follow its precedent decision for this premises and include a condition for the hours restriction that was mandated under that 2014 permission, which granted at the time sui generis use, enabling the salon to operate. To avoid undue disturbance to nearby residents, this committee decided at that time to restrict the operating hours of the salon to 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday, with no operations permitted on Sundays or public holidays. The officer's report states that it is somehow not fair to keep this hours restriction in place on the entire premises, given that it previously applied only to the salon. Given the proposed change of use from a salon to a licensed cafe, and the resultant increased impact of that use on the combined premises on me and the other nearby residents, it would seem entirely appropriate to follow this committee's precedent decision and keep the hours restriction in place on the entire premises, rather than allowing this business to operate without any hours restriction at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Engler?
Yes, most of the documentation, including the last one, concentrates on the impact, the acoustic and the visual impact to the side and to the front, and it ignores how much the proposed changes will alter the purely residential environment behind, at the back of the shop, especially in the adjoining garden flat and the ground floor flat, which is 49 Earls Court Road and 51 Earls Court Road. We've coexisted quite happily with the shop around the corner for decades because it didn't invade our privacy.
Just say you've got 30 seconds remaining.
Sorry?
30 seconds remaining.
Okay,
yeah.
It didn't invade our privacy and our peace and quiet, and that's very vital because we kind of, have a busy road at the front. And now we're effectively being told that we should live with an unprecedented mechanical noise from a commercial plant on the roof right next to our properties, and on the assumption that this would stop noise and fumes from the hospitality business going through the windows at the back, which were previously for private use of the shop owners only. So we think that we need more guarantees if we were to agree that we have an air conditioning mechanical noise there, that at least the windows remain for private use, which is not in there. So
thank you.
Restrictions or conditions, please.
All right, we may pick some of those up in questions in a moment. Thank you. And now we've also got registered, maybe you could identify yourself, the applicant, Mrs. Fati, and Mr. Nicholas, the agent.
Hi there,
you both around?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so you have 3.5 minutes together, as you wish.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an overall view of our client's perspective. As a small individual and independent business owner, our client intends and will use her property to its fullest potential. The largest side already can function under use class E. Reverting the use class of the smaller side of the property to its original class will enhance the functionality and customer experience. This will allow the premises to run as a cohesive business with uniform operating conditions. The very limited size of this small unit negates all the concerns around undue increase in traffic and noise. Based on the office's assessment and consultation with the Director of Environmental Health, most of the concerns and objections relating to this application are either irrelevant to this application and the scope of this assessment, or they are not justified. To enhance the working conditions of staff and provide a pleasant environment to customers, our client intends to install a condenser unit on the roof. This is supported by an environmental noise survey and noise impact assessment submitted with this application. This report has established the lowest background noise level in the vicinity over a 24-hour period, allowing noise emission limits to be calculated and set in compliance with the borough's noise criterion. As a responsible businesswoman that is new to the RBKC community, my client expects nothing less than a fair assessment of this application, which in the eyes of the assessing officer is fully permissible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so colleagues, questions to objectors and applicants. Who would like to go? Councillor North.
Thank you. I realise that there is sensitivity. I know the site very well. I realise there is a lot of sensitivity with neighbours here. I think it would be fair to say that it was a surprise to many of the neighbours that this type of application was coming forward to such a small space. However, we would always want to encourage business. This unit on the top is going to cause unhappiness with your neighbours. That's quite clear. Is there anything you can say, this is to the applicant or the agent for the applicant, is there anything you can say to your neighbours that will reassure them that the operating of this unit will not cause any noise, smell? And I'll be asking the officers about that when I come to them as well.
Yeah, we're enclosing the unit within an acoustic enclosure. So the other thing to point out, I appreciate there's some concerns from the rear, but if you look from the street scene, the elevation barely shows the unit, and that's just because it's a parallel drawing. That's from the front elevation, to be mindful. From the side elevation, you wouldn't see that. It's just because the 3D visual is looking from an overhead view, which isn't going to be experienced from the street. The acoustic enclosure will enclose not only for an acoustic purpose, but visually will improve the look of the unit. And as I say, we have submitted a noise impact assessment alongside this. I believe that case officer as well said that there's quite a strong precedent for these units and policy for these units, which are installed all across the borough, and they are monitored as well. So yeah, I think if you'd like to ask any further questions to the office, I'm sure they'll respond on that point.
Yes, thank you for that. My next question to the applicant is the sensitivity of the conservation area. It is a very sensitive matter, and this item can be seen from across the road at very least. Can I ask your reasoning for having this that will be visible as to not having it at all?
So this is just for having, because of the weather changes and it getting very hot during summer, we need this AC unit. But with the report that we are happy to cover it, so the visual wouldn't be very ugly from the street and from the back of the building. So we are happy to cover it with a box or flower to make it nice, presented nicely, so it wouldn't be visually ugly.
Thank you. Could I just follow up on that particular point? Because the one thing is about the unit's sort of visual appearance, which is 24/7, and you're suggesting that you could do some sort of mini landscaping to soften its appearance. The other thing is on the hours of operation, and that actually comes to Mr. Ratner's point, which is when do you envisage your cafe or the use of this extra bit of building that we're talking about now actually happening, what are your proposed hours, and would the air conditioning unit be switched off outside of those hours?
Yeah, so with the licensing, alcohol licensing, the hours that they recommend is between 8, I mean, when they put it in the report, it's between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and we are happy to go ahead with that timing hours. And also when we are not there, for sure, the AC would be off. It's not on when no one's there.
Councillor Idris.
Yeah, thank you. You stole my question, but then I'm just going to ask further. At 8 to 6, Monday to Friday?
8 to 6, Monday to Sunday.
Monday to Sunday.
Yeah.
So even on Sunday, you're going to be at 6, because it's predominantly residential, that street. Aside of the shop in the corner, everything is residential.
Yes,
until
we
you
are,
get to-
so very close to us, there is a pub.
Yeah, it's
And
all
the
the way
other
at the
side,
other end.
in front of the pub, there is a cafe working from 7 in the morning to 6 in the afternoon. And we are not far from them, so it's, and the other side of us is Elscourt Road, which is a very busy road.
Okay. Would you consider a reduced hours on Sunday, for instance?
To be honest, hospitality
As a
business
neighborly
is
guest.
Saturday, Sunday is the best timing for the business on Saturday and Sunday. And this is a very small unit. It's a very small area. So we are not talking about 100 people coming inside this property. Comparing to the cafe and the pub, it's very small.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and actually, we'll probably pick this up with officers, but just to understand it, we're talking about the smallest one room of the smallest building, is that right? And so what is the intended use for that? Because clearly the cafe can operate with those hours on the larger building. This is just the extra space you're going to use.
So it would be like an extra bit of table for serving people, part of it.
And just to help us, because we can't quite envisage the size, is it sort of 2 people in the space that we're talking about, or 4, or something different? Just give us an indication.
Yeah, I mean, you probably get 2 tables, I'd imagine. You say 2?
Yeah, 2 or 3
2, yeah.
table maximum. It's not that big.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a bit of an abnormality at the moment, because you've got one larger unit, which is Class C, and because of variations and changes, the last few years where there's different ownership, etc., that smaller unit was almost separated into a different use class.
Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, we'll move on to discussion with officers.
Thank you.
Right, questions to officers. Councillor Idris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is, can we reduce the hours on Sunday, for instance? And also, what about seating outside in the future? Do we have the control to say no seating outside, for instance? Because it's a very small pavement, and if we start having outside seating, it will be even more noisy.
Thank you. Reducing the hours, we would recommend you didn't do that by condition, mainly because of what's been discussed already. So there's an existing shop there with unfettered hours, so there's no hours of use condition on the main shop. So it would be unreasonable to attach a condition on that. You could only then condition that small piece that's in use as the nail salon, or was in use as the nail salon. And again, I think that would be unreasonable given the overall use. It also duplicates other legislation. So we've got a licence that we've heard about, which is, to a degree, a material planning consideration for you, where we've got other restrictions on the hours of use there and around deliveries and all of those things. So that's your best protection for neighbours in that sense. Seating outside, that's not the application before you. So I would say a condition, again, is not reasonable or necessary. We could add an informative, but then it almost draws attention to something else that would then have to be licensed and considered separately. So it may almost be, again, not necessary to have that informative, but that would be within members' gift, I believe.
And just picking up, Ms. Ray, on the licence point, just so we understand it, is the licence that is now granted on the premises, does that cover both the existing unit that can operate without planning permission and also the small application site that we're discussing today? So is there already a license with ours in existence?
I am not 100% sure about the tiny piece, the new piece we're considering. I shouldn't say tiny piece, the one that's having the change of use. The current license I looked up, and the trading name and address is 84 Abingdon Villas. So if that has a different site address or not, I'm unsure. But I would say the large proportion of the shop as existing, so to the right of your screen and behind, that is what the license definitely relates to. And I assume, but I cannot categorically say that it would incorporate that, but it would still be subject to licensing if that license doesn't capture that small area. So there would be protection there.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd, questions? All right. So just seeing where we've got to, people are always concerned about air conditioning units, but we have heard that would operate only when customers are around, and I think officers will tell us that it benefits from the usual condition that if it can be heard operating, then there's a switch-off condition, so it must be so maintained, both in its acoustic enclosure and also its any sound that emanates from it.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's really important to draw residents' attention and interested parties to recommended conditions 3 and 4. So if planning permission were granted this evening and that air conditioning went up, if you can hear it from your property, please contact planning enforcement, because there is a condition on here that means if it's audible from another premises, it's required to be switched off. So we've got those conditions on there, and the report has given us the comfort that those conditions can be achieved, providing it's maintained, etc. But we would have enforcement powers if they failed.
Thank you. And a second point that came up during the applicant and objector questions was, is there anything that could help disguise the impact of the air conditioning unit and its enclosure? Is there something either in colour or something else that officers can think of, or how would you add that if colleagues were interested in that? How would you try and capture that? Because it is quite visible, given it's a low-level flat roof and can be seen from different angles. Obviously, we're conscious of not making something worse, and we're certainly not going to design anything tonight. But can officers think of how something that could soften its impact be visually considered?
I think that's a very good question. We could have a condition for it to be dark painted, the wood. That could potentially improve it even further, because at the moment, this is the details of the enclosure just up on the screen. It's wooden with that kind of lead sheet over it. So the lead sheet would probably sit quite nicely against the roof from the private views, but perhaps painting on that timber would further reduce any glimpsed views you'd see through the side angled over the roof.
Thank you. We'll just hear from colleagues now. If there are no more questions, where are we thinking on this? Obviously, it's extremely unusual case in that the size relative to what already exists next door to it, which can operate without control, even though one is always nervous for neighbours in introducing a different use. The relative size of this, I am having to take into account myself. So we're probably best thinking, are we getting the conditions fair and right to control both this visually and its use? Councillor Lloyd, thoughts?
Yes, I would be keen on the conditions that the officers say about mitigating and designing out the aircon at the top. But for the rest of it, yes, I'd agree.
Councillor Waller, Idris.
Yes, I'm with Lloyd on this one. Also, I think if we can mitigate the visual aspect of it, and also, of course, the sound and the vibrations, as in the condition 3 and 4, will be, and as long as they adhere to the levels agreed, then I think we'll be okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So ready to move to a vote. If we say taking into account some wording of condition that officers could come up with to ameliorate the visual impact and let officers resolve the fine details of that. We can't do that tonight. Taking that into account as an extra condition. That's
Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify a few things. First of all, when you're talking about perhaps a cover for the ACU, we haven't got a condition at the moment, so... Or it is actually part of the drawing?
It's part of the drawings and the
So
development.
you don't need a condition?
No, yeah,
okay, so
that's fine.
That's fine. The other one is mentioned about switching off when the business is not in use. I don't think 3 and 4 covers that, so would that be an extra condition?
That's correct. That it doesn't. 3 and 4 wouldn't cover it aligning with the hours of use. But that said, you shouldn't be able to hear it at any time. So even if the staff were cleaning up from 8 till 9 p.m. and they kept the aircon on a hot summer's night, it shouldn't be audible at all from neighbouring properties. So I think we've got enough protection, that would be my opinion, through 3 and 4, which we've enforced in the past successfully.
Okay, so we don't need another condition. So the last one was the hours of use on the smaller part of the building only, the one that has been the change of use from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Was that something that we're... I mean, not on the cafe, that's unrestricted hours.
I would be nervous about adding it on the smaller piece because it would inherently be used as one unit. It's then, what if they store their bins in that area or have one late customer and then they can't get out again? So I think if it's going to function as one unit, it would make more sense to be together. But the licensing would really provide the protection, I believe, members would be seeking.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready to move to a vote, and as I said, it's just the wording on potential measures to soften the impact of the visual impact of the air conditioning unit, and noting the other sort of parts of this comment. Can I see the offered recommendation is to grant? Can I see those in favour? Okay, that is granted with that extra condition. And thank you, applicants and objectors, for being reasonable. I know it's a difficult thing to move forward with, but hopefully everyone will act very considerately in the neighbourhood.
Thank you very much, Sam. We'll just have a break of a couple of minutes. I think we can restart. So now we go back to the South Pack, and I think we need to consider the application at 11 Radcliffe Place. And I think Alice Carver, Alice, it's back to you, isn't it?
Correct. Thank you, Chairman. Again, I would draw members' attention to the addendum report. This sets out an additional condition, number condition 4, which is for the Code of Construction Practice. The application site relates specifically to the ground floor and lower ground floor flat located at 11 Redcliffe Place. This is identified by the red arrow on the slide in front of you here. The application before members this evening seeks planning permission for a 2-storey rear infill extension with a terrace located above, a infill within the front light well to connect the front vaults, steps to the rear garden from the closet wing at ground floor level, internal changes, and also some associated landscaping works within the rear garden. The existing lower ground on the on the bottom, and the existing ground floor plan can be seen on this slide. The proposed lower ground and ground floor plan can be seen on this slide. Members may note the infill extension located at lower ground and ground floor level has been set back from the existing closet wing. I would draw members' attention to the location of the stairs and the small balcony or terrace area located at ground floor level here. And the works to the front vaults, which I'll show members some more photos of, is located in this area here to enclose it and connect the front vaults. In terms of elevation, the existing elevation is on the left-hand side and the proposed elevation on the right-hand side. I would just draw members' attention to the plans provided within the pack and the annotations. The plans are proposing to have a privacy screen on the boundary with number 13, and that can be seen on plan form, and I've just indicated that with the arrow on the slide in front of you. To give members some context, these are some photos taken from the rear garden. On the left-hand image, the photo is looking up to number 9 and the terrace located on the top of the closet wing. The infill extension would be located where my cursor is, just here. Looking at the right-hand image, this is looking towards number 13. You can see there is a small projection at lower ground floor level here. That would be removed, and that's where the stairs and the small balcony would be located at ground floor level. In terms of the work to the front light well and the vaults, the covering on top of the vaults would be replaced, and the doorway here, located underneath the existing staircase and vaults, would be built up with a new doorway. That concludes my presentation this evening. The officer's recommendation before members is to grant planning permission subject to the recommended conditions in section 8 of the officer's report. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Now we've got an objector who's registered to speak. Now I think Mrs. Milliken, is that
Yes,
right?
hello.
Good.
I'm Martha Milliken, thank you.
Yes, very good. Please go ahead.
I have serious objections to the proposed ground floor level balcony and stairs leading down to the garden at the rear of the property, because it would look directly into my house. It would grossly impinge on my privacy, as I have French windows opening up to a balcony on my side. Not only would they overlook me, it is an infringement of my security, as it would be extremely easy to climb over the railing and into my house. It is my understanding that anyone whose property might be directly affected by a proposed planning application must be notified in writing. It is also my understanding that this application may be approved on the grounds that a previous application has already been approved. Neither I nor my neighbour upstairs at 13 Redcliffe Place received any such letter, and the first communication I did receive from the Planning Department was on March the 8th, 2023. I objected to the planning application on the RBKC website and have been in touch with the planning officer, David Batchelor. No notification for PP 22-07650 was ever received. In the report by the Director of Planning dated the 12th of June 2023, Article 6.4 states, "At the rear of the lower ground level, there is a balcony with a traditional black painted railing." This is in fact not what is being proposed. The balcony and door is to be on the ground floor level, not lower ground, directly next to mine, and would be adjoining my balcony, which is exactly what I'm objecting to. On April the 24th, a drawing was submitted with plans to show no balcony adjoining mine and the stairs to the garden sited on the other side of 11 Redcliffe Place. But the elevation plans in the application had not been updated and still represented the original plans. I queried this with the planning office and was told that the new drawing showed the stairs on the other side was the correct version and that he would request that new elevation plans be submitted by the developer so that they were consistent. I would have had no objections to that proposal. On Tuesday, the 20th of June, I received a phone call from the planning officer to say that the developer had been informed that the revised placement of the balcony and stairs was a material change and would require a new planning application. In light of this, the developer has decided to revert to the original plans. If the application is approved, it will dramatically affect my enjoyment of my house. I have lived here for 30 years, and the prospect of someone looking in on me intrudes on my privacy and makes me feel invaded and vulnerable. Anyone standing on the balcony would be able to see where I'm having breakfast, and anyone coming up from the stairs would look directly into my windows. Because of the configuration of the boundary wall, which is stepped, a security privacy screen would not be sufficient. Because of the lateness in reverting to the original plans, which were not updated on the website, I request at the very least a delay in granting planning until this issue can be resolved. I would urge reconsideration of the previous submission with the stairs on the other side of the property as proposed by the developer on the 21st of April, and we were in agreement on these plans. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, questions? Questions, anybody? Actually, I'll ask a question. Can we just go back to the, this is the, the plan, the proposed rear elevation, okay? Yeah, thank you very much. Now, as I understand it, you're at number 13, yes, is that right? So are you saying that you are the other side of the proposed privacy screen? Is that right?
That's right.
Have I got that right? Yes. Okay, all right. And you're saying that the privacy screen you think is inadequate in terms of your own amenity. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right, right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Colleagues, any other questions? Well, first, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Is there anything the developer can do to mitigate your concerns about security and overlooking?
Yes, he submitted a second set of plans to the council with the stairs to be on the other side and the balcony to be on the ingress side, so that it would have been on that wall. Okay. And I thought that was perfect. I would have had no objection to that whatsoever.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed. We may well take up some of these points when we now talk to officers. So, but thank you for speaking. Oh, sorry, Lloyd, did you have a question?
Not really a question. It's just a note that we don't have anybody for the applicant or an agent for the applicant here today. Okay.
No, you've not registered to speak, so I'm afraid you can't speak. Okay, no, I'm afraid you can't speak because you're not registered. I apologise for that. Maybe, one of these things. But, okay, perhaps officers can assist with some of the points, actually, in effect, on your behalf, possibly. I'd like to start by just wanting to make sure I've understood this correctly, so that if I've got this right, there's actually an existing application for, again, if we look at these rear elevations, that the stair up on the left-hand side, that's actually already, and there's a small balcony, that's already got planning permission. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
You're correct. So I'll just draw members' attention to section 4 of the officer's report. So there was an application that was granted on the 8th of February 2023, which granted the internal reconfiguration, and also you'll note that it granted the creation of direct steps access from ground floor closet wing to the rear garden with a balcony. I have got that plan just on the screen for members' attention. So the balcony and the stairs can be seen in the red. That is similar to what's proposed as part of this application.
In other words, what's happening is that this application is taking elements which have already got permission, but putting them into this new application, and also adding this privacy screen as well. Is that right? That's what's happening?
That's correct. So the last application did also include the privacy screen. This application sees the addition of the infill extension, some alterations to the fenestration and the works to the front. I would just note that whilst this permission has been granted, it's not, to my knowledge, has yet been implemented.
Thanks for making that clear. So, colleagues, sorry, well, I was talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. So, in my earlier question to the objector, it's about what will be a happy situation for her, and she mentioned the stairs being on the other side, and that there was an application about that. So, what happened? Why did it change?
Thank you for your question. So it's my understanding that during the course of the application, conversations were had between the planning officer and the agent around moving the stairs to the other side of the garden. Whilst that would be acceptable in principle, we weren't able to consider it as part of this application, as it would require a new consultation. Therefore, the application before members this evening is based on the original plan submitted when the application was submitted, validated and advertised by ourselves.
Thank
you. I'm just wondering, well, in case I missed it somewhere or if it's in the addendum, but under recommended conditions, there isn't anything about a code of construction. And it seems that with the previous application and now with what's being up for being granted here, there are infills, and it is a sensitive area at the backs of houses. Is there a code of construction where you have to sort of fill out appendices and cover things?
Thank you. It was noted that wasn't included on the original recommended conditions, so I have picked that up as part of the addendum, and it would form condition 4.
Yeah, I think that's necessary, that we should consider adding that. Do we have details of the privacy screen? Because again, that doesn't seem to be actually a condition anywhere, or any details of it.
You're correct. The details at the moment, as just shown on plan form, we could include a condition requesting specific details of that screening should members feel it's necessary. I would recommend that we could word an appropriate condition to that nature.
I mean, I would have thought that is actually sensible. And in terms of the height of a privacy screen, what would you suggest was a reasonable, was it 1.7 metres sometimes we use, isn't it, or 2 metres?
Correct. So the current height of the screen that's shown on the plans is around 1.5 metres. Usually we do seek for something around 1.7, 1.8, which is above head height. So it may be that we use the condition to secure final details of that screening, and officers are satisfied that the height would avoid any overlooking.
I would suggest, colleagues, that adding a condition along those lines is something that would actually be important, in fact, in making it acceptable. Colleagues, any other points to officers? Lloyd?
It's just to do with the privacy screen. It's also the robustness of it. I mean, I don't know what it's proposed to be of, because the objector mentioned about the security as well as the privacy aspect. So if it could be of a robust nature, of an adequate size, as well as quality of as well.
Thank you, that's noted. What we could look to do is also include an informative to suggest the kind of screening that members would expect. So we can use, as part of that informative, that it would cover the full width of the balcony and would be so that you wouldn't be able to see views through. So we can draft that as an informative as well.
Any further points? No. Okay. Well, in that case...
Chairman, could I just ask clarification on the condition? Would members like it to be prior to commencement, or within a certain time frame, or prior to occupation of the balcony?
Would prior commencement details, I think the details should be there prior to commencement.
Perfect.
I would suggest.
And then installed and maintained for the lifetime?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, exactly. Okay. Any further points? No, I think we can probably move to a vote. So we have the existing conditions, and I think, Sam, you were suggesting a condition 4, an extra. So, yeah, the code of construction should be a condition 4. Okay, and then. We would have another condition, new condition 5, which related to the privacy screen, and I would suggest, take your suggestion of 1.8 metres with the details clearly to be agreed with officers. Okay. So on that basis, with those amended conditions, the recommendation is to grant. Can I see those in favour of granting on that basis? Okay, so that is agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So if we can return now to the North Pack, and we move to, I think, probably the longest address on the evening, the carport, Sunningdale House, 10 Sunningdale Gardens, adjacent to 31 Lexham Mews. And I think, Fiona, that's back to you to introduce this, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just drawing members' attention again to the addendum report. We'd also like to make one further tweak to the condition we've suggested, and it's just after the words other than, to add the words for private. So it just secures that the cycle and car parking is for private use, and we will pick that up following any decision made. So turning to the slides, this is the application site, a small parcel of land next to number 31 Lexham Mews to the rear of 10 to 13 Sunningdale Gardens. And this is a helpful image of what's there now. So as existing, there is this kind of timber pergola structure on the site. And this is the kind of roof line of it, number 31 Lexham Gardens to the bottom left of your screen. And you can see it sort of nestled in behind that. And another view here of that timber pergola structure set between the buildings. These are some street view images from Google that just show you the existing gated entrance to the site, and you can just see the roof of the timber structure there. And then we turn to the plans. This helps you see what is actually being proposed. This is the existing, and when I flick onto the next slide, you can see the proposed. So this is the existing timber structure. If you look in the bottom left image is probably the most helpful. The existing timber pergola, and it's an increase in the height of that to create this new cycle storage area, and an increase in the height of the wall that runs along there. Just zooming in on that same plan, there are some helpful annotations. So the dashed blue line notes the existing wall level, and the dashed green line notes the existing trellis level. And when we say the trellis level, helpfully one of the objectors provide us with a photograph of looking over to the site. The red image was to indicate their concerns and the increase of the height. This isn't a verified view, so please take it just for information purposes, but it shows you the kind of lattice trellis behind what they've put over the top. Officers are recommending approval subject to that additional change to the condition, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now we have speakers on this case. Mr. Warren, now I think you're present, sir. Thank you for bearing with us, actually. I know it's becoming quite getting well into the evening. Now, you're obviously a neighbour and an objector, so when you're ready, please go ahead, and you've got up to 3 minutes. Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the owner and resident of 10A Sunningdale Gardens, which building and garden the carport runs alongside. I believe no one objects to the carport being replaced. The question is whether it should be replaced precisely as the applicant desires. I, together with ESSA and others, believe the proposed increases to the height of the carport and to the adjoining boundary wall are excessive and unnecessary and should not be approved. The planning report says that the proposed changes would entail only a slight increase in height to the boundary wall and a minimal increase to the carport height. Well, the applicant intends to raise the boundary wall to the height of the adjoining mews wall for no vital reason. The plan shows it as 18 centimetres above the trellis, but in fact it would be about 30 centimetres above the trellis. The applicant's plan envisages raising the ceiling of the proposed garage by 48 centimetres on their figures compared to the present structure, and the external height by 84 centimetres. Hardly a minimal increase. My house and garden are substantially below the carport floor, so the result would be a wall over 3 metres high, just 3 metres from my rear door and accompanying window. The planning report says there would be no demonstrable loss of outlook or light or overshadowing, given the presence of 10A's trellis. Well, the writer may have viewed the site from the street or the carport, but not from my perspective. The trellis and the accompanying bamboo screen is largely translucent. Sunlight shines through it. A new brick wall would not be. This fact should have been taken into account in the report, but evidently wasn't. I calculate the area of my translucent screening as 5.7 square metres. If the development goes ahead, this will be replaced by around 11 square metres of non-translucent brick wall. There would be a harmful increased sense of enclosure contrary to CL5. The police advise that trellis deters burglars better than a brick wall, but the proposed brick wall would overtop the trellis, as that image showed, removing the deterrent. This would be contrary to the Council's own crime prevention policy and material planning consideration. There is no need to increase the height of the boundary wall or the carport structure. The plan states the interior height of the carport as 162 centimetres. In fact, it is around 195 centimetres. This height is ample for a car garage, let alone a cycle shed. The existing boundary wall and screening is high enough for privacy already, overtopping, as it does, the carport structure. If the applicant is keen to have an extra high ceiling for her cycle shed, the obvious solution is to lower the floor closer to the level of the adjoining garden. I submit that the application be granted with conditions that no wall should be built above the boundary wall, and that a new garage structure should not exceed the height of the existing carport. This would surely be the most reasonable decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I think the applicant's agent is present. Tracy Rust, is that right? Right. Okay, so in similar fashion, when you're ready, you've got up to 3 minutes as well.
Great, thank you. The applicants live in Stratford Road, which lies immediately to the north of Sunningdale Gardens and Lexham Mews. The application site and carport was up for sale recently, and the applicants took the opportunity to purchase the site on the basis it could provide ideal secure storage space for their cycles. They now have a long lease, which they purchased earlier this year from the freehold owners of 10 Sunningdale Gardens. As your officers have just explained, the proposal is to remove the timber frame carport structure and construct a small outbuilding for cycle storage. The provision of the new timber gates on the frontage is also proposed. I think it's also important to note, first of all, that the actual increase in height is 400 mil. When taken together, the wall and the trellis is already 850 mil. Pre-application advice was sought in the first instance, and your officers were supportive of the proposals, hence this full application. The replacement structure is high quality in design and will be constructed in materials, brick and timber, to be respectful to the appearance of the neighbouring buildings and the surrounding townscape. It would sit on a slightly smaller footprint than the existing carport and set back from the street frontage. Whilst it would be slightly higher, this small increase, together with the raised height of the side boundary wall, would not have a significant adverse impact on neighbours' living conditions in terms of loss of daylight, sunlight, or sense of enclosure, as your officers have explained in their report. The buildings at 31 Lexham Mews and 54 Stratford Road already overshadow neighbouring gardens, such that the much lower outbuilding adjacent to number 31, now proposed, will have no noticeable impact upon those gardens. As your officer's report advises, the replacement structure would only have a slight increase and would not cause any demonstrable harm to light, outlook or overshadowing. With regard to the new gates, we note your officer's report comments in paragraph 6.4 that the existing gates do not contribute positively to the conservation area and that their replacement is welcomed. Whilst there have been a number of objections to the proposals, it should be noted that the Council have in fact received significantly more letters in support, principally on the grounds that the proposals represent an improvement in terms of visual impact and use of the site. We note also that the Council's transport officers raised no objection to the proposals and commented that the additional cycle storage would encourage sustainable modes of travel. Your officer's report concludes that the proposal would preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area, and good living conditions of neighbouring occupiers would prevail. On that basis, we respectfully ask you to agree with your officer's recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, questions? Perhaps I can go first, actually. Can I refer to, it's a sort of side elevation drawing. It's the one that's got the dotted green and blue lines on it to show existing levels. Yeah, if we can just get that. Right, that's on the screen there. I just wanted to ask the applicant first, well, the agent first. I want to make, because it's a complicated site, I want to make absolutely certain, understand what's happening here. So the dashed blue line is the existing wall level. Is that actually, because that seems relatively low, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct.
And because to the rear of where a car would be parked, the level falls away, so there naturally is a larger height above the existing wall. Yes, and the dotted green line is that's where this trellis that's talked about is. So that in effect takes the total height up somewhat further. Now, reference was made, I think you said 850 mil. and I think Mr. Warren mentioned 84 centimetres. Is that dimension from the blue dashed line of the existing wall up to what is the total height of what is proposed? Is that where the 84 centimetres, 85 centimetres comes from? Is that correct?
The 1850 that I mentioned to you is the height of the existing boundary wall and the trellis fencing in total.
Ah, right. So you're saying the boundary wall up the blue dotted line up to the green dotted line is 84 centimetres odd. Is that right?
I beg your pardon, I confused the matters there because the 1850 is the rear wall, So this one is, so that the wall is 1480 up to the boundary wall. Up, and then the trellis is above that. Yes.
Right. So how much? Okay, let's ask a different question. Okay, so we've got at the moment the dashed green line. You're saying is the top of the trellis, which is there at the moment.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, how much further on this plan? How much additional height is the bike store part beyond where the terrace, where the trellis, I should say, is at the moment?
400 mil.
Right, that's 400.
Yes.
Right, so that's 400 mil. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And if I can just ask the objector, do you agree those sort of dimensions and figures? Does that make sense?
No, I don't, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Can I cast some light on this? So you're asking about the difference between the top of the trellis and the top of the proposed brickwork above it. The brickwork above it is supposed to be on the same level as the top of the mews wall that adjoins it. And the difference between the top of the trellis and the top of the proposed wall would be about 30 centimetres. That's the difference between the top of the trellis and the top of the existing mews wall. And as to your question about the carport structure, the difference between the top of the trellis and the top of the proposed carport structure on the plans that we've seen isn't 40, it's 62 centimetres.
Sorry, can you just say that again so I didn't catch that?
The difference between the top of the trellis and the top of the proposed carport structure, I'm not talking about the boundary wall, the carport structure, the shed, is some 62 centimetres.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, colleagues, questions? Walla.
Thank you, Chair. A question to the objector. What will make your life easier? It's if you have a wish with this application, what will it be?
Well, it's really simple. I'm very relaxed about the carport as it is being demolished and being replaced with a structure rather like the one that's proposed. And I'm happy for the gate to be replaced. I'm happy with all these things. All that I'm not happy with is for the carport to be unnecessarily high, higher than it is because it's plenty high enough already, and for the boundary wall to be interfered with, which is party wall actually, for the boundary wall to be raised where there's no good reason for it whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask, what are your thoughts on what your neighbor is proposing?
I'm sorry, could you say it again?
No, I'm asking the applicant now. What are your thoughts on what your neighbor is proposing?
Well, I think this proposal is not unreasonable, to be perfectly honest. And it's an outbuilding, it's a garage structure, it's of a standard height. I think what you possibly are not aware of is that the cycle storage is for competition bikes, the applicant's race and so they're not just standard normal bikes that you see pootling around Kensington. So they will be larger, and I think one wants to be able to walk into it quite easily, in and out of it, rather than to have to duck down. I believe that the carport at the moment is quite low.
But if I'm looking correctly at the image in front of me, the height, it becomes 2 meters 2100 by the time you finish with it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah? Okay. So up, and that is going above the green line, which my understanding is that's the trellis, right?
But only by 400 mil.
Yeah, but you keep saying only by 400 mil, but it is, there isn't, I mean, I don't know very many people who are 2 meter high, 2 meter tall. You said I mean, if you have something up to 1900, you still, a tall person will be comfortable standing without having to bend over.
Well, forgive me here, but I'm no architect.
Because it's what I'm trying to achieve here is get to a middle ground where everybody's happy, because you still have to live around these people. So it's good to have a good neighborly relationship and not have someone cursing your garage every time they look at it.
I absolutely agree with you there, but I don't think that this proposal is unreasonable.
But, okay, well, if for compromise, what would you compromise then?
I think that the application is the one in front of us.
Okay.
I think it's difficult for us to the temptation to want to try and redesign something that would be acceptable, obviously acceptable, is one we have to resist, I'm afraid. Sam Lloyd, any questions that you have? Lloyd.
With Councillor Idris, I'm with her on that. I think that the only other option is for this to be represented with a different form that would be acceptable to the neighbour. I don't see that what the neighbour's saying is unreasonable. For a bike shed to be more than 2 metres, I don't know.
Okay, I think I need to be careful here. Are there any questions to either the objector or applicant? No, Sam, you... Okay, all right, very good. Well, thank you both for speaking and answering our questions there. So we now turn to discussion with officers. It's tricky because I think in a way many things about this case are totally straightforward. I think replacing some not particularly special railings with a timber gate, perfectly sensible. Replacing the current sort of carport structures looks rather ugly and dilapidated, frankly. That's totally straightforward, I think. I think really the only issue is about the impact on the neighbour because of the height of it is really it's the one wall that is facing onto 10 Sunningdale Gardens. I think. I mean, I do take the point that the dimensions that we're talking about here are right down at the lowest level that planning sort of sensibly gets involved in. We're talking about, 40, 50, 60 centimetres, that kind of thing. However, the distance between the flank wall and the other property, we've been told, is the order of 3 metres, which is not a huge distance, equally. I just want your advice on, to my mind, I think daylight and sunlight considerations, I find it very hard to see that there would be anything there. I suppose if we went in this direction, we would say that the current height of the flank wall was just a bit too high, and that created a sense of enclosure for the neighbour. I guess that would I think that's the only mechanism that I would see for saying that this was unacceptable. Do you have any comment about that?
I would agree, but I would agree that's the only mechanism, but I would disagree that it was unacceptable, that relationship. Partly because the increase in height is, we do believe it is minor in the grand scheme of things. Whatever measurement you take to be correct, we have taken that to be 445 millimetres as drawn on the drawing as an absolute maximum. Whatever measurement you take, it's still less than half a metre in a context where you have number 31 Lexham Mews as a two-storey plus property. You've got, it's tight-knit and constrained, but the actual change of that boundary wall and what you would realise in terms of light and sense of enclosure, we really do believe that would be minor. In terms of the internal height of the bike store, which you've discussed, it is kind of it's actually quite low internally for an outbuilding. So outbuildings you'd often see at 2.53 metres, that's kind of the most common, I would say. And when you allow for the build-up and everything else, that's why it gets to that height. But I think there's no issue here about character and appearance. If, in fact, with what members have discussed this evening, you need to weigh the positives in the balance of that, so the replacements of the gates being a good thing. But you need to, in doing so, in weighing that, it would be that sense of enclosure and that loss of light was too harmful, and thus the decision fails.
Any other questions to officers? Or is that, you happy with the way that I put that? Okay. Do you want anything to add?
Well, are you ready for the vote?
Well, no, I was going to ask colleagues what they felt about this and how they were minded to feel about it. So I think, yeah, it's a pity that the bike store roof didn't have a kind of a slope, which meant it was actually lower at the boundary and being higher at obviously where it was actually against 31 Lexham Mews. But we have to consider what's in front of us. How are people minded to think about this? What do you reckon? Who'd like to go first?
I'm certainly not against storage of bikes and safety and security of bikes. I'm certainly not against the gates, but I would like to see a different proposal brought back to this committee.
Again, I agree. It sounds like the 2010 election. I agree with Nick. I agree with Lloyd. And I think considering your neighbor is extremely important. And I can see maybe a revised application with a sloping towards the neighbor side will be far more acceptable. And if at the end of the day, there is a lot of room for a lot of bikes on the other end of the storage. Thank you.
Yes, what my colleagues are saying sounds sensible to me. We can't revise and change anything now, so we're only left with a decision of grant or refuse, unless it's not going to be withdrawn at this stage. But it does feel like there is an opportunity, given the quantity of build-up, whether it could be done in a more subtle and phased way, just to fit in a little bit better with how the sense of enclosure that it could create.
Right. Well, thank you, colleagues. Just quickly turn to officers. So, I think it sounds as though we're sort of probably minded to say that this is on balance not acceptable. Obviously, we'll have to vote. I think the reason, as I mentioned, I think would be a sense of enclosure for the neighbour. I think in a way it's pity because I think we all feel there's clearly an potential application there, which would obviously be acceptable. And I think, but unfortunately, it's just not, it doesn't happen to be the one that's in front of us. So I think that's probably, I'm going to move to the votes on this, because I think I know where we're going. Is that, you're happy with that?
Yes, we have to vote on the recommendation.
Yes, that's right.
That amended, well, the
Yeah.
condition as amended by Fiona in the presentation.
Yes, yes. So, okay, so initially we have to have a vote on the recommendation, which is to grant, with the conditions set out and also the condition that was mentioned in the presentation. So can I see those who are in favour of the recommendation, please? Can I see those who are against? Okay, so the recommendation is not adopted. I would suggest that we pass a resolution that we are refusing permission due to a sense of enclosure of the neighbouring property at 10 Sunningdale Gardens, and that I propose that. Is that seconded? Okay, Councillor Idris seconds. Can I see those in favour of that resolution, please? Okay, so that is agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can we now move to the application in Victoria Road, please? Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, draw members' attention to the addendum report. There's an amendment to condition number 17 that's been proposed, and some other things to note. So planning permission at this site is sought for the demolition of an existing garage, and the creation of a new garden space, some remodelling, the creation of a basement and changes to windows and access stairs. I'll just show you some aerial images of the property in context. And this is a street scene image as it fronts Cottesmore Gardens. And these are the west or rear elevations. Because the site is kind of almost all developed, the section through helps you see that existing built form versus the proposed, and the creation of that sort of garden space we speak of. Here is the south side elevation that shows you the new basement level they're proposing and where it goes under the house and part of the newly created rear garden. Another section drawing. And these are the front elevation drawings where the changes are more limited. And then just turning to the floor plans, this is the existing garage to the rear of the site that will be demolished to create this new open space, like a small rear garden. And the proposed, you can just see it there. Officers are recommending approval for this application, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, nobody's registered to speak about this, so we move straight to questions for officers. Who'd like to go first? Sam, do you want to go? Yeah.
Yes, it's just a number of the neighbours have pointed out that removal of a garage is in the report made acceptable by the creation of an on-street extra parking space, because the garage opening would be sort of closed up and residence parking would be added. What's the size of the garage? We've had just come from a garage case where I've got the width measurement. What have we got? If you can see from the plans, what the size of the garage that is being lost?
I'm really pleased you asked that question, actually, Councillor McAvoy, because I was going to clarify something on the garage. But to answer your first question, it's 3 metres wide, so it can accommodate a car for the purposes of our transport SPD. So there would be a loss of parking. And importantly, where we say in paragraph 6.16, it says it's likely to create an opportunity for a new on-street parking bay. I did check that. And I don't think it will. I think it would have benefits in the footway being reinstated, the visual improvements associated with that, and more space for people to park. But we don't have the full 5 metre space outside. So this proposal, with that garage going, would result in the loss of one off-street parking space at the back that could be provided. So that's something to weigh into the balance. There's the benefits of providing the open area at the back of the site as a result, and the other things, but something to be mindful of. Thank you.
Yes, because we've seen a couple of examples in the cases this evening, not that they're in any way identical, but a garage that we've just heard is on 2.7 metres on the plan, and that's intended to be continued to be used by those applicants as a garage. And the first case this evening, we had a car-free agreement because on granting of that new property, we said it would be unacceptable for it to create extra street parking. So I'm trying to feel consistent here. I know it's whether it's a lot of other things going on in this application, but purely from a consistency and parking point of view, I question whether this is the right thing. I'm also slightly concerned that in the addendum pack, I think there's a letter from the applicant's agent which says that they want to retain the garage doors so they can retain potential future use of car parking on their hard standing. So remove the garage and somehow get a car in there as well. So the parking elements, I understand from a basement point of view that this looks to me like it's compliant, even though it's large, but it's the impact on parking which does seem to be against policy to me.
I think that's a valid consideration, and your reference to the agent's own comments that they want to reserve, that position, I think is relevant when you're considering that.
Okay. Yes, I suppose the issues that Councillor Mackover has raised about parking, I guess that, this is a substantial reconstruction of a very large building, isn't it? So I suppose, given everything that's happening, perhaps on balance, these issues about car parking, which if they were just sort of standalone issues, perhaps would change the overall judgment. Is that how officers see this?
I think it's a valid consideration. The benefits on this scheme would be, I think, the creation of this small garden area and opening that up through losing the garage. But that needs to be weighed against the loss of off-street parking, not being re-provided for everyone's enjoyment in the form of a bay. So if you think that is harmful, that's for members to make the decision on that point.
Okay, I think we should probably take a vote on this. So the recommendation is...
I do have an issue.
Sorry, Lorna, you want to say something?
The new condition in the addendum does actually go on to say, it talks about the process to modify the traffic management order to provide an additional on-street bay, but what you're saying now is that couldn't happen.
It's the wording additional on-street bay should be tweaked, because it would be additional on-street space, because it's not going to provide a full bay. It will be amended and it will provide additional space, but I don't think there's enough. There's not 5 metres, which is what you need to count as a brand new bay. It's not big enough. I think it's about 3.5.
So would you need a traffic management order?
So you'd still need the traffic management order to restore the footway, and remove the drop curb, and then recreate, create additional space outside the house. So there'd just be 2 larger, better bays, or 3 smart cars.
To rearrange the on-street parking, basically, or whatever, but it's not quite as written here.
So to provide additional on-street space rather than bay.
Okay. So
That's what you could vote on.
Thank you. So we're saying that within the addendum report, the amended condition 17 needs to be amended. Yes. Are we content that officers would address that if we do grant permission? We happy with that? Yes. Okay. No, I understand the point you're making. Okay. All right. Okay. So if we can, I think, move to a vote. So the recommendation is to grant with the conditions set out in the report and also the addendum report condition amending 17, which will in turn need to be adjusted as we have just discussed. Okay. So on that basis, can I see those in favour of granting on that basis, please? Those against? Okay.
Was that
Alan,
one?
Did you vote? Yeah.
Sorry, was
okay.
that?
So that's granted by 3 votes to 1.
Okay.
Councillor Mackover voted against.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so that's granted. Thank you very much indeed for that. And finally, this evening, we have the application in Westbourne Grove. And Fiona, that's back to you, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Again, draw members' attention to the addendum report with a minor change. So for this application, planning permission is sought, in short, for an extract duct from the existing retail unit at ground floor level up the back and clad in brick. So this is a really helpful aerial image that shows the rear elevation of these properties, and this is the application site here. So turning to the drawings, the application demise is outlined in this red kind of dashed line, and you have an existing terrace to the back. This closet wing of the neighbouring property, the white, is this closet wing here. Just showing you on this image to give you a marker. So it's this new structure that they're proposing, which is an extract flue, flicking between the two, clad in brick. On the section drawing, you can see it here, coming to the back on top of that rear terrace. And these are some images closer of the application site. And that concludes my presentation, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Now we do have some speakers registered for this. I think Fiona Fleming-Brown and also Simon Wallace registered as well. So please, thank you for bearing with us through quite a long evening. But whenever you're ready, you've got up to 3 minutes, which you need to share. Okay, so please go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. I'm the chair of the Pembridge Association. The officer's report fails to reflect the number of homes which will be adversely affected by the proposed development. A significant number of private views within the Pembridge Conservation Area will be impacted. In Westbourne Grove and in the Sunlight to 220 and 224 Westbourne Grove will be affected. 48 and 50 Lonsdale Road, including the Hidden House, which has a long first-floor terrace, will directly face the proposed vent housing in Chimley. This is in fact a densely residential and well-occupied area at the rear and unsuited to commercial kitchen equipment, which should be properly incorporated into the interior up to a mid-plan chimney, not tacked on to the exterior. CL5 requires that existing homes of neighbours, and this includes their gardens, roof terraces and courtyards, should not be adversely impacted, which we believe this application threatens. The site is particularly reverberative as it's closed in on all sides, causing a soundbox effect, which the Council's environmental health team will confirm was decisive in the Council refusing the use of the rear of Chuck's restaurant just next door. This rejection was then upheld at appeal with the Inspectorate. We feel that odours may likewise be slow to disperse because of the enclosed nature of this particular space. Should consent be given, we support the conditions recommended in the officer's report, but ask that these go further and actively include neighbours in a 6-month review of the noise, vibration and odour issues at the point at which the equipment is in use. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sam, do you want to, you've got another minute or so if you need it. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of Mrs. Cathy Foyle, who is the owner of the flat at 22A Westbourne Grove, which stretches across the commercial premises at 220 to 224, and against which the extract duct is proposed to be affixed and housed. This duct and enclosure is located directly outside her lounge, close to windows and affixed to her rear wall. This causes considerable concern for Mrs. Foyle. Although reports have assessed airborne noise emissions, there has been no technical assessment to demonstrate that there will not be structural-borne noise and vibration through to her flat. The application is insufficient in this regard. Mrs. Foyle is concerned that even if anti-vibration mounts and silencers are included, without proper maintenance and upkeep, she would suffer quite significant noise disturbance and vibration detrimental to her amenity and reasonable enjoyment of the flat. The positioning of the extract duct on her rear wall and close to windows serving habitable rooms seems unneighbourly. Furthermore, there are concerns that the statement dealing with odours is more of a statement of intent rather than technically demonstrating that the proposals will not cause problems. There is also concern that the noise report of the application refers to 3 replacement condenser units in an existing enclosure to the rear of her terrace. These can be seen on the proposed first floor plan. It is not clear if planning permission has ever been granted in the past for such units. In order to not cause a noise nuisance at night, it relies on 2 of the 3 units being switched off. Additionally, with the extract duct, the noise report considers that the window at number 226 to be the nearest neighbour, when it is in fact Mrs. Foyle's lounge window. It is also apparent from the noise report that if the extract duct is operated at night after 11 p.m, it would be above the required level and cause nuisance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, questions to objectors? Who would like to go first?
Thank you. I'm going to ask my favorite question, which is, what will make you happy? What change will make you happy?
I think on behalf of Mrs. Ford, I think it's that we don't have the technical certainty that the equipment would not cause either a noise nuisance or odour nuisance. So there's a lack of detail and assessment, particularly on whether noise would transfer and transmit through her rear wall. Although it's housed within an enclosure, there isn't really any technical assessment to demonstrate that that would not be a problem. So for her, the concern is that potential for noise and odour.
But you do know if any premises creates unnecessary noise and you report it and they get reported multiple times, they will automatically lose the license to operate. So that is already mitigated in our regulations, if you see what I'm saying. So if there is anything else that will, that we can recommend, for instance.
Well, I think we recognise that noise in terms of being assessed outside windows can be tested and examined and made sure that it meets the standards. Yeah. It's the concern about whether it will transmit through her wall, because it is hard up and affixed to her rear wall, and it's the lounge inside and a bedroom, and we feel that that has not been fully tested or explained.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think for the conservation area, we feel that a large industrial chimney of this sort is not suitable for a residential area. These are quite low-built houses. People do value their gardens, their roof terraces, and their private spaces, and we don't think that their views or their amenity will be improved by this. If such a duct is needed, then it should be in the interior of the building, not in the exterior of a conservation area.
Okay, thank you.
Once again, I find my questions are actually for the applicant. There is nobody here from the applicant. Is it the suspicion of the objectors that there is some future plan for such a large vent, or is this just for current use?
I think it is. I think it's clear that the applicant describes this as future-proofing.
Yes.
In fact, one of the application documents shows the interior and says potential vent termination point for commercial kitchen. A commercial kitchen is obviously part of a restaurant.
Thank you. Yes, I'm reading between the same lines that I think you're reading between, but unfortunately I can't ask the applicant or an agent for the applicant, so thank you.
I just wanted to put a point to objectors. I mean, many commercial flues and things are rather ugly structures on the rear of buildings. I mean, what's proposed here, this brick chimney, I agree it's arguably reasonably substantial, but in terms of its, impact on amenity, I mean, if provided it's built in suitable brick, surely it would sort of drift into the background quite easily, in a way that an enormous aluminium pipe going up the side of a building, doesn't drift into the background. Do you have any comment on that point of view?
I think this section of the terrace, the facade is unbroken, and so it's not pleasing to see something breaking the natural rhythm of the terrace. These are low-built buildings, and so it will interrupt the roof line. It's not an improvement, and it is an irregularity. It's not an authentic feature of this period or of this terrace. It's a piece of cod architecture to hide an ugly duct. And in a conservation area, that's not something that we would welcome.
No, I accept what you say. Nobody. I've never been accused of being an architect. I don't. I'm not offended by any of that. Any other questions, colleagues, for either any of the objectors? No. Okay. Thank you very much indeed for your... Okay, so our chance to ask officers about this. Voila, do you want to go first?
Thank you. I think if we can start where we left off about the chimney and the size, and do you feel it will, kind of blend in with the background eventually, or can it be reduced in size?
That's the conclusion we've reached, is that it preserves the conservation area on balance. So that was our conclusion. But, that's for members to decide this evening whether you agree with our conclusion. I would agree that it doesn't enhance the conservation area, but on balance preserves.
Okay. And my other question is, what are we doing by way of, like I said earlier, we're fairly strict here with people with noise and nuisance and complaints. Is there anything else we can add on top just to kind of tighten it up a little bit for everyone around there?
So the proposal, the development description and the submission doesn't include air conditioning units. So we're confident as officers planning permission isn't being granted for those. So that was sort of one of the noise issues raised by Mr. Wallace. The other issue raised relates to the actual inside of the flat when that extract flue is operational. We don't have any specific information relating to that. but officers, in our assessment and in discussion with environmental health, something outside of the main solid brick wall within an enclosure subject to condition 3 we were comfortable with. If members were concerned that there would be noise or a potential for noise, or you don't have enough information, again that is something for you to consider on there being inadequate information, but officers have come to the conclusion we have enough, and given the way it's designed, etc., environmental health haven't raised an objection on that point.
Just a final question. Is there any scope within, and I'm thinking here of the noise, but also the odour conditions that we already have, for perhaps putting any sort of time limit on them, hours of operation? Is there scope for that, or are they? Do we feel that it's really covered by all of the environmental health legislation that already exists and applies to everything like this?
It's difficult as well because there's no change of use, there's no change in operational hours. I'm not sure of what the operational hours of the existing Class E use is. So I think it would be difficult for us to time limit it or give any hours of use for the extract. Also, if for any reason there was a problem, you'd want to be able to extract the odour and get it above and discharge above the roof, which is the best place for it. So that would probably be my advice on that point.
Any other? Lloyd, do you want last one?
Just quickly, is this actually required for the operation as it is at the moment? Because it seems like a kind of big structure for what's there at the moment.
There's nothing in the submission to say it's absolutely necessary for it to be used. It's Class E at the moment, so it's a whole host of different things that can happen there. So I have the same suspicion that it may well be that there'll be a change well, there won't be a change of use because it's all within Class E, but there may be a change of operator as a result of this or something in the future. But that's not before us this evening. There's no change of use proposed. It's just that duct. So I think your assessment should be narrowed to the visual impact, which you've discussed, yes, and the potential amenity impact.
So on that question, you have already answered it, but as it's pointed out, is this in a conservation area? It's in Colville Ward, but it's still in the Pembridge Conservation Area. This isn't an original feature. This is added on with no real purpose that we can see before us. Had there been a separate application for this to be a super restaurant, perhaps, then maybe I could see it, but I can't quite see why we've got a chimney that is not in an original state of design and a conservation area for no real obvious purpose, and I can't speak to the applicant or his agent because he's not here. Well, it's a material difference. I mean,
I think it's actually a valid point through you, Chairman, that there's the public benefits. There's none identified in the report, so there's none to weigh in favour if your conclusion is different to officers, and that we've said on balance preserves, but if it's yours that it doesn't preserve, then there needs to be public benefits to demonstrate why that would
but at the moment,
be justified.
I can't see a single benefit. Yeah, exactly. I can't see anything. Why is this happening? And especially when there's nobody here to explain that leads me to believe that there's something else I don't know about.
Yeah, I think we need to be a bit careful here. Applicants are entitled to put forward the application as they see fit. They don't have to justify anything. All right, they can simply. Yeah, we have to make a decision, but I'm saying we can't invent things because of what we might suspect. And people making an application do not have to, as I say, they do not have to justify what they're doing. They're entitled just to put the application in. Okay, that's all. So, however, we need to make a decision about this. How do people feel about this? I mean, I do take the point that there doesn't seem to be an obvious public benefit, and it really comes down to whether we judge there is any harm to the conservation area or not, I suspect. What do people feel about this? Just quickly going down the table, or rather coming up the table. So, Lloyd, do you want to start?
Yes, I think it's pretty obvious from my feelings. I'm very sceptical about this, and I can't see any public benefit at all. And we've already got quite a number of people that say that they're unhappy about this. And I really can't say to those residents that that I can justify it. Really, I can't support it.
Okay. Well, what do you think?
My belief is in a conservation area, we must conserve, and we're not doing that with this. I don't see the benefit for it to kind of excuse or allow that, grandeur and grossness.
Sam, what do you think?
Same as those that outweigh the harm. We're not saying that there's no harm, but if there's no benefit, then does it outweigh?
Okay, all right. Okay, well, I think I probably know where we might be going on this. Now, if the recommendation were not approved, I suppose a resolution to refuse permission would have to be based along the lines of a less than substantial harm to the conservation area, which was not outweighed by any public benefit. I think officers, are you content with that formulation if we went there?
Yes, absolutely. And based on the discussions relating to size, siting and design, we can formulate a reason for refusal.
And remind me, it's CL4?
I would suggest CL 1, 2, 3 and 11, with your direction to do it, add any others that we see are necessary.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, colleagues, so the recommendation in front of us is to grant permission with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? Can I see those against? I'm going to abstain, so the recommendation is not adopted. Councillor North, would you like to propose that the application is refused on the basis of less than substantial harm to the conservation area for the reasons that we have just discussed with officers?
Yes, I'm happy to propose that.
Is that seconded? Councillor Idris seconds. Can I see those in favour of that resolution to refuse, please? So that is agreed. Very good. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Good evening.